What if the smile you trusted most was nothing more than a mask? What if the warm images splashed across the tabloids, the carefully polished Netflix moments, the glamorous walk down the aisle at Windsor, were all covering up a side of Meghan Markle you were never meant to see? That's the question Jessica Mulroney, Meghan's once closest confidant, is forcing the world to confront at last. And the answer might leave you gasping. Before we continue, please hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, and turn on the notification bell for updates. Jessica didn't speak for years. She stayed quiet, disappeared from Meghan's public orbit, endured whispers of betrayal, and sat on secrets that could have rocked the monarchy. But at 45, she finally decided enough was enough. And when she opened her mouth, the words that came out weren't just shocking. They were a dagger aimed at the heart of Meghan's carefully crafted reputation. The bombshell is simple, yet devastating. Meghan Markle, the Duchess who once bowed before Queen Elizabeth II in front of cameras, allegedly mocked the late monarch in private. "She's just a little old lady in a hat," Jessica recalls Meghan saying. "Why should I bow to her?" Can you imagine? Picture it for a second. The Queen, frail yet dignified, representing nearly a century of tradition. The woman who served as the symbol of continuity for the Commonwealth. And Meghan, the outsider welcomed with pomp, ceremony, and the chance of a lifetime, allegedly reducing her to nothing more than an elderly woman wearing a decorative accessory. This is where the story begins, but it doesn't end here. Because Jessica claims that behind closed doors, Meghan's private disdain for the royal family ran far deeper than a single offhand comment. Ask yourself this. If someone is willing to mock the Queen, the most respected, revered, and symbolic figure of them all, what do you think they might have said about the others? About Prince William, Prince Charles, Princess Anne? What about Kate Middleton, the woman whose smile Meghan once claimed had left her in tears before the wedding? But before we peel back those layers, let's pause. Let's understand what's at stake here. This isn't just gossip. This isn't just two friends falling out. This is about the private truth versus the public performance. It's about the betrayal of trust. Not only Meghan's betrayal of the royals, but also her betrayal of the millions who believed her story, who cheered for her as the fresh face of the monarchy, who wanted her to succeed where others had failed. And it's about Jessica Mulroney herself. Who is she really? Why should anyone care what she says? If you followed Meghan's rise, you know Jessica wasn't just some acquaintance. She was the stylist, the fixer, the one Meghan leaned on as she crossed the bridge from Hollywood obscurity to royal superstardom. Jessica stood by her side during fittings, rehearsals, strategy meetings, even private meltdowns. If anyone knew the truth, it was Jessica. For years, she stayed silent. Even when the friendship collapsed in a messy swirl of race debates, social media cancellations, and whispered fallout, Jessica said nothing. She had every reason to defend herself, yet she stayed quiet. Until now. That silence is what makes her words cut deeper. Because this doesn't come from a bitter ex-friend ranting on Instagram. It comes from a woman who waited, who weighed, who finally reached the point where she could no longer carry the burden of secrets. And here's where the contradiction sharpens like a blade. Meghan has built her brand on compassion, empathy, authenticity. She talks about kindness. She presents herself as a modern humanitarian, unafraid to speak truth to power. But Jessica paints a portrait of someone very different, someone who laughed in private at the very people she hugged in public. Someone who played the role of the perfect duchess on camera, then tore it to shreds once the curtains closed. Think about the implications. If Meghan mocked the Queen, what does that mean for every curtsy, every tribute, every carefully staged photo that followed? Were those moments of sincerity or performances? If her smiles were hollow, then what about her tears? Were those staged too? It's uncomfortable, isn't it? It's like finding out the movie you loved most was filmed on a set of lies. But that's why this story matters right now. Meghan's credibility is already in free fall. Lawsuits, fact-checking reports, explosive memoirs, and growing public skepticism have shaken her image. Jessica's testimony doesn't just add fuel to the fire. It sets the stage ablaze. And it's not just about Meghan and the monarchy. It's about loyalty, friendship, and betrayal. Jessica Mulroney was once so close, she was dubbed Meghan's best friend forever. She was trusted with secrets no one else knew. And now she's revealing them. Not just the glossy ones, but the kind that make you question everything. Do you believe her? Should you? That's the question lingering like smoke after a match is struck. The most haunting part of Jessica's account isn't just the words themselves. It's the timing. Queen Elizabeth is gone. She cannot defend herself. She cannot confirm, deny, or forgive. Meghan's alleged remark lingers in the air like an insult carved into marble, impossible to erase. Imagine being a member of the royal family hearing those words now. Imagine being William, watching your grandmother honored as a legend, only to hear that your sister-in-law once dismissed her as nothing more than a little old lady in a hat. The pain isn't just personal. It's institutional. It's legacy. It's history itself being mocked. And yet, this is only the first layer. Because Jessica insists Meghan's mockery extended beyond the Queen. She claims Meghan rolled her eyes at William's formality, scoffed at Charles's mannerisms, ridiculed Anne's bluntness, and derided Kate's poise. If this is true, then the smiling Duchess was never smiling at all. She was sneering. She was playing a part. And the people who loved her, the people who defended her, were nothing more than an audience for a carefully crafted performance. But how did Jessica reach this point? What made her finally decide to expose these secrets? Was it anger? Revenge? Or was it guilt? Guilt for protecting Meghan for so long. Guilt for staying silent while the royals bore the brunt of Meghan's narrative. Guilt for watching the Queen die without ever knowing the truth was out? That's the thread we'll pull in this story. Because to understand Jessica's revelation, you have to understand the collapse of her friendship with Meghan. You have to know how the trust eroded, how the loyalty fractured, how the silence finally shattered. This isn't just a story of betrayal between friends. It's a story of betrayal between worlds. The Hollywood world Meghan came from, the royal world she entered, the personal world she shared with Jessica, and the private world she thought no one would ever see. Now, Jessica has opened that door, and what lies behind it will make you question everything you thought you knew. But remember, this is only the beginning. Because if Jessica was willing to expose Meghan's words about the Queen, the one figure Meghan could never publicly challenge, then what else is she ready to share? What other truths lurk in the shadows of royal dinners, late-night phone calls, and whispered conversations in luxury suites? And more importantly, how much darker could those truths be? Because as Jessica herself hints, the insult to the Queen was just the start. What she claims Meghan said next, about other royals, makes the Queen remark look almost tame by comparison. But what came next would change everything, and no one saw it coming. So here we are. Jessica Mulroney has opened her mouth after years of silence, and the world wants to know why. Why now? Why at 45? And why with words that feel less like casual gossip and more like sharpened knives cutting through Meghan Markle's polished image? The timing is everything. That's the first thing we need to understand. Jessica didn't blurt this out in the heat of the moment. She didn't make an angry Instagram post the day the friendship collapsed. She didn't rush to a tabloid when the world started whispering that Meghan had ditched her. She stayed silent. For years. But silence, as we all know, isn't neutral. It builds pressure. It brews guilt. It fuels speculation. And for Jessica, that silence became unbearable. Let's rewind for a second. Picture the Meghan we first met in the public eye. The glowing bride-to-be, swept into a fairy tale romance with Prince Harry. Royal photographers couldn't get enough. The world was watching with curiosity, with excitement, with cautious hope that this American actress could modernize the monarchy. And by her side, Jessica Mulroney, not in front of the cameras, but just out of frame, the stylist, the fixer, the trusted confidant who made sure Meghan looked flawless every time she stepped out. She wasn't just adjusting hems and picking dresses. She was adjusting Meghan's image. She was part of the machinery. Now think about what that means. Jessica was closer than the journalists, closer than the palace staff, closer even than some members of the royal family. She was inside the circle. She heard the unfiltered comments. She saw the eye rolls. She caught the side remarks. So when Jessica finally speaks, it isn't just some bitter ex-friend talking. It's the voice of someone who knows the script from the inside. But here's the twist. Jessica's decision to speak wasn't born from pure revenge. At least, that's what she insists. She says it was born from a mix of exhaustion, guilt, and the weight of truth that couldn't stay buried forever. She claims she's haunted by the conversations, the private sneers at the people Meghan publicly praised. Can you imagine carrying that? Sitting at dinner tables where Meghan mocked the royals, then watching those same royals smile stiffly at Meghan in public? Knowing the truth, but saying nothing? Jessica describes it as suffocating, like carrying around a secret that eats at you a little more each day. She says she told herself it wasn't her place, that it wasn't her business. But every time Meghan spoke about compassion, about kindness, about authenticity, Jessica says she felt her stomach turn. Isn't that the contradiction at the heart of this story? Meghan, the woman who built her brand on being authentic, allegedly being most inauthentic in the place that mattered most, the monarchy she swore she respected. But here's what really twists the knife. Jessica claims Meghan didn't just make these comments casually. She made them gleefully, almost as if mocking the Queen, mocking William, mocking Kate, gave her a sense of power. Jessica describes moments where Meghan would laugh at traditions, dismiss centuries of protocol, and call the royals stuck in the past. And think about it. Isn't that the exact opposite of the Meghan we saw on television? The Meghan who smiled at the Queen, who walked behind her during engagements, who looked in awe at the grandeur of Buckingham Palace. It makes you question everything. Were those moments genuine? Or were they performances, staged for cameras while the real Meghan rolled her eyes the second the doors closed? Jessica insists it was the latter. Now, the natural question is, if Jessica knew all this, why did she keep quiet for so long? Why not warn the public earlier? Why not defend the royals when Meghan's Oprah interview turned the tables and made the monarchy look cold, cruel, even racist? That's where guilt comes in. Jessica admits she was complicit in Meghan's narrative for years. She says she defended Meghan when others questioned her. She says she kept her mouth shut even when Meghan's stories didn't match what she'd seen firsthand. And why? Because of loyalty. Because of friendship. Because of the unspoken rule, best friends don't spill secrets. But loyalty cuts both ways. And Jessica eventually realized Meghan had no intention of being loyal back. When the friendship crumbled, Meghan didn't just distance herself. She erased Jessica, unfollowed her, cut ties, made it clear that the woman who once guarded her secrets was no longer needed. That erasure broke something in Jessica. Suddenly, all those years of silence felt less like loyalty and more like a prison. And so, after years of carrying the weight, she finally decided to speak. Let me ask you something. Do you think Jessica would risk everything, her reputation, her credibility, even her chance of ever reconciling with Meghan, just to make up a lie? Or do you think the truth finally became too heavy to keep? Because when Jessica broke her silence, she didn't ease into it. She didn't hint. She dropped the bomb straight away. Meghan mocked Queen Elizabeth. And that revelation, that one shocking sentence, is what pulled the curtain back on everything else. Imagine you're Jessica. You're sitting in a private room. Meghan's there, comfortable, maybe sipping a glass of wine. The Queen comes up in conversation. And Meghan leans back, smirks, and says, "She's just a little old lady in a hat. Why should I bow to her?" How would you react? Would you laugh nervously? Would you freeze? Would you brush it off as a joke? Or would you sit there, like Jessica says she did, stunned into silence, realizing the Duchess you defended wasn't the person you thought she was? That's the power of this revelation. It isn't just about Meghan insulting the Queen. It's about the deeper realization that the Meghan of public adoration and the Meghan of private disdain were two completely different people. Jessica claims this was the moment her perspective shifted. She started replaying every smile, every curtsy, every speech Meghan gave. And suddenly, they all looked like performances. But here's the kicker. Jessica says that wasn't the only time Meghan mocked the royals. Far from it. She claims it was a pattern, a habit, something Meghan seemed to relish. And that raises the stakes, doesn't it? Because one snide remark can be dismissed, two can be excused. But a pattern? A repeated habit of mocking, sneering, belittling? That paints a picture of someone who never respected the institution they married into. This is why Jessica's silence mattered. Because by holding her tongue, she allowed Meghan's narrative to dominate. She allowed the world to believe the royals were the villains and Meghan was the victim. Now she's flipping that script. But of course, every revelation opens new questions. Why should we trust Jessica now? What has she gained from speaking out? And could there be more, far more, that she hasn't told yet? That's the tension that keeps us watching. Because if this is what Jessica reveals at the start, what else does she have tucked away? She hints at it herself. That Meghan's remarks about the Queen, shocking as they are, were nothing compared to what she allegedly said about other royals. She hints at a dinner party where Meghan let it all out. She hints at moments when Meghan's disdain crossed from eye rolls into verbal daggers. And those hints make you lean closer, don't they? Because if mocking the Queen was just the beginning, what came next must have been devastating. But Jessica doesn't spill it all at once. She drops the Queen remark like a lit match, then lets the flames spread slowly. Piece by piece, conversation by conversation, she begins to reveal the Meghan the public never saw. And that's where our story turns next. Because as explosive as the Queen remark was, Jessica swears it was only one part of a much bigger picture. A picture that would unravel Meghan's image piece by piece, until nothing was left but smoke and mirrors. But the unraveling didn't begin in public. It began behind closed doors. It began with a laugh, a smirk, a whispered insult Jessica says she'll never forget. And once you hear the next part, the royals Meghan allegedly mocked most often, you'll realize just how deep this disdain went. Because Jessica insists Meghan's sharpest words weren't reserved for the Queen at all. They were aimed at others much closer in age, much closer in status, and much closer in rivalry. And what she supposedly said about them is even worse. What would you think if someone smiled at you in public, but mocked you mercilessly the moment the cameras turned away? That's the contradiction Jessica Mulroney says she lived through. And when she finally described Meghan Markle's private disdain for the royal family, the words she used were chilling. Let's go back to the infamous remark, because it's the foundation of everything. Meghan, according to Jessica, leaned in during a private conversation and said, "She's just a little old lady in a hat. Why should I bow to her?" That wasn't just a joke. It wasn't a careless slip of the tongue. Jessica says it was delivered with a smirk, a smugness, a tone that told you Meghan meant every word. And if Meghan could reduce Queen Elizabeth, the matriarch, the monarch, the woman who ruled through war and peace, to a little old lady, then what chance did the others have? Jessica claims this disdain bled into Meghan's conversations about nearly every senior royal. It wasn't random. It was systematic. A pattern of ridicule and dismissal that painted Meghan not as an outsider struggling to fit in, but as an insider who never wanted to fit in at all. Think about the contradiction here. Meghan, on camera, curtsying to the Queen. Meghan, holding hands with Harry while smiling at Charles. Meghan, laughing beside William and Kate at official engagements. Those images were beamed across the world as proof of harmony, unity, and respect. But behind closed doors, Jessica says Meghan was rolling her eyes, mocking their accents, dismissing their traditions, and sneering at their sense of duty. And the audience, all of us, bought the performance. Let's break down some of the claims Jessica made, piece by piece. First, Prince William. Jessica says Meghan often ridiculed William's stiff posture, calling him robotic and pretentious. She would imitate the way he held his hands behind his back, exaggerating the formality until the people around her laughed. To Meghan, William wasn't a future king. He was a caricature. Then there was Kate Middleton. In public, Meghan praised her sister-in-law. In interviews, she defended her after rumors of rivalry. But in private, Jessica says Meghan frequently referred to Kate as uptight and desperate to please. Worse still, Meghan allegedly mocked Kate's accent and her Stepford wife smile. And what about Charles? Jessica claims Meghan never understood the affection Harry's father inspired in Britain. She allegedly joked about Charles's mannerisms, mimicking his soft voice and even poking fun at his hands. Yes, the same hands that tabloids have discussed endlessly. Meghan supposedly used them as material for private comedy routines. Princess and wasn't spared either. Jessica recalls Meghan dismissing and as irrelevant, a brutal choice of words considering, and is one of the most hard-working, respected royals alive. The pattern is unmistakable. One by one, Meghan allegedly cut down the people she smiled at publicly. Now pause for a second. What does that do to your perception? When you see Meghan curtsying to the Queen, do you now imagine her thinking little old lady in a hat? When you see Meghan embracing Charles, do you imagine her mocking him later? When you see her next to Kate, do you imagine her rolling her eyes as soon as Kate turned away? That's the cognitive dissonance Jessica says haunted her. Because she was there. She saw the two faces. But here's the part that deepens the twist. Jessica says Meghan didn't just mock them for entertainment. She mocked them to boost herself. It was a way of proving she was smarter, cooler, sharper than the institution she'd married into. By tearing them down in private, Meghan built herself up, at least in her own eyes. Isn't that a dangerous mindset? To see your in-laws not as family, not as colleagues, not even as allies, but as characters in your own private comedy show. Jessica describes it as surreal. Sitting in rooms where Meghan would smile sweetly one moment, then roll her eyes the next. Watching her deliver speeches about compassion, only to hear her privately sneer about people's clothes or accents. It raises the question, how much of Meghan's public image has been real, and how much has been performance? Jessica insists the performance never stopped. She even claims Meghan would sometimes rehearse her compassion lines, practicing how to deliver them with sincerity. But when the practice was over, she'd laugh, shrug, and drop back into her real opinions, the ones dripping with disdain. And it wasn't just the royals who felt Meghan's sting. Jessica says Meghan mocked royal staff too. The assistants, the aides, the people who worked tirelessly to make everything run smoothly. Meghan allegedly called them servants in private, dismissing their traditions as archaic nonsense. Do you see the pattern? Public warmth, private contempt. Now, some will say, isn't this normal? Don't we all complain about family behind closed doors? Don't we all joke about our bosses, our coworkers, even our friends? Yes, to a degree. But the difference here is scale. Meghan wasn't mocking an annoying uncle or a strict teacher. She was mocking the monarch of the United Kingdom. She was mocking the very institution that gave her global fame. And Jessica's point is clear. The gap between Meghan's public persona and her private disdain wasn't just large, it was unbridgeable. Here's the irony that bites hardest. Meghan positioned herself as a victim of royal coldness, someone desperate for acceptance. But if Jessica's account is true, Meghan never wanted acceptance. She wanted dominance. She didn't want to be embraced by the monarchy. She wanted to laugh at it, dismiss it, and rise above it. That's the Meghan Jessica describes. And that Meghan is far scarier than the one we saw on Oprah. But Jessica didn't reveal everything at once. She says the true breaking point came at a dinner party, where Meghan's disdain spilled out in full view of people who couldn't believe their ears. That night, Jessica insists, Meghan said things so shocking, so cutting, that it left even her closest allies stunned. And what Meghan allegedly said that night, about specific royals, would set the stage for the biggest fallout of all. Because mocking the Queen was bad enough. But what Meghan reportedly unleashed at that dinner party made the Queen insult look almost harmless. And once you hear what came out of her mouth at that table, you'll never look at her the same way again. Look at the photographs. Meghan Markle smiling graciously beside the Queen. Meghan walking shoulder to shoulder with Kate Middleton. Meghan standing with Charles, glowing as if she'd found her second father. On the surface, these images tell a story of unity, of grace, of a woman who stepped into one of the most intimidating families in the world and found her place. But what if those smiles weren't real? What if they were masks? Jessica Mulroney claims that's exactly what they were. A carefully curated performance designed to charm the cameras, while the real Meghan rolled her eyes and sneered in private. And if that's true, then every public image of Meghan standing alongside the royal family is laced with irony. Because behind those bright smiles were words that cut like glass. Jessica remembers it vividly. Meghan would attend a royal engagement, dressed to perfection, charm on full display. The photos would go viral. The headlines would gush, Meghan shines in royal outing. But when the lights dimmed and the cars pulled away, Jessica says Meghan would launch into mockery. William's posture? Robotic. Kate's smile? Fake. Charles's speeches? Out of touch. Anne's bluntness? Brutal to the point of comedy. Meghan supposedly had a remark for everyone, and she delivered them with a smirk, as if she alone saw through the charade of royal duty. Isn't that the ultimate contradiction? To beam at someone while holding daggers behind your back? Let's dig into one example. Meghan and Kate, side by side at Wimbledon, laughing as cameras flashed. The world pointed to that moment as proof of reconciliation, a thawing of tension between the so-called dueling duchesses. But Jessica insists the truth was uglier. She says that after the outing, Meghan ridiculed Kate's perfect princess act, claiming Kate rehearsed her every smile in the mirror. Another example, Meghan walking behind the Queen during official visits. Every frame suggested respect, admiration, even awe. But Jessica says Meghan's private comments stripped all that away. She's just a little old lady in a hat. And then there were moments with Charles. Meghan held his arm at public events, listened intently to his speeches, and praised him as a father-in-law. But Jessica claims Meghan later joked that Charles lectured like a schoolteacher and mocked the way he waved to crowds. Do you see the theme? Public warmth, private ridicule, smiles on stage, snipes off stage. And it wasn't just commentary. Jessica says Meghan sometimes imitated the royals, exaggerating their voices, their hand gestures, even their walk. She would mimic William's reserved tone, stretch out Kate's vowels, or shuffle like Charles for a laugh. Friends around the table would chuckle nervously, but Jessica says she felt uneasy. Because what Meghan was mocking wasn't just people, it was an institution. Now, pause for a second. Think about what this means for Harry. If Meghan mocked his family so openly in private, what position did that put him in? Jessica claims Harry sometimes laughed along, brushing it off as harmless fun. Other times, he went quiet. But either way, the damage was done. How could Harry ever look at his family the same way again if Meghan was constantly undermining them behind closed doors? Jessica describes the tension as unbearable. Imagine sitting at a dinner party where Meghan had just returned from a royal event. The papers were praising her. Twitter was exploding with compliments. But the moment the doors shut, Meghan would smirk and say, "If only they knew what a joke this all is." It makes you wonder, was Meghan's greatest performance not her acting on Suits but her role as a duchess? And that's where the deeper irony comes in. Meghan often claimed she struggled to adjust to royal life, that she felt stifled, silenced, trapped. Yet Jessica paints a different picture of a woman who felt powerful mocking the royals behind their backs, who relished the chance to tear them down, who seemed to believe she was the only one brave enough to laugh at the monarchy. But bravery isn't mocking someone when they can't hear you. Bravery is saying it to their face. And Meghan, Jessica insists, never did. She smiled, she curtsied, she nodded. Then she mocked. It's like living in two worlds at once. The public Meghan, gracious and humble. The private Meghan, cynical and cutting. Which one was real? Jessica says the private Meghan was the truest version. The one who didn't have to pretend. The one who showed what she really thought of the family she'd married into. And this double life took a toll. Jessica claims Meghan often confided that she hated the act, that smiling at people she secretly disdained was exhausting. But instead of trying to reconcile the contradiction, Meghan leaned into it. She became sharper in private, crueler, as if the contrast between her public halo and private sneers gave her a twisted thrill. This wasn't just about jokes. It was about control. Meghan allegedly used mockery to establish dominance in private circles. By ridiculing the royals, she made herself the clever one, the one who got it, while the rest were hopelessly trapped in tradition. It was Meghan's way of proving she was above them all. And Jessica admits, at first, it was easy to laugh along. Meghan was witty, sharp, charismatic. Her impressions were funny. But over time, Jessica says the humor felt darker, crueler, less about laughing at quirks and more about tearing down reputations. She remembers one night in particular. Meghan had attended an engagement with Anne. The photos showed Meghan smiling warmly beside her. But later that evening, Meghan allegedly called Anne irrelevant and joked that her bluntness made her sound like a grumpy, old farmhand. The room chuckled, but Jessica says she felt a pang of guilt. Because Anne, of all royals, had given decades of service without scandal. She wasn't irrelevant. She was indispensable. Moments like these piled up. And each time Meghan put on her public smile, Jessica says she could no longer see it as genuine. She saw the mask. She saw the performance. Now, ask yourself this. If someone shows two faces, which one do you trust? The one they put on for the world? Or the one they reveal when they think no one important is listening? Jessica made her choice. She says the private Meghan was the real Meghan. The mockery wasn't an act. The smiles were. But here's where things escalate. Jessica insists this pattern didn't just erode her own trust in Meghan. It eroded the trust of others too. Close friends started whispering. Staff noticed the eye rolls. Even Harry, Jessica claims, sometimes looked uncomfortable when Meghan's ridicule went too far. And yet, Meghan never stopped. If anything, she doubled down. The contradiction became sharper. The performances became bigger. The mockery became crueler. And Jessica says she realized she was watching a split personality. Meghan the Duchess, beloved by the public, and Meghan the cynic, who mocked the very stage she stood on. This is where the story edges into the shocking dinner party. Because according to Jessica, one night Meghan didn't just make snide remarks. She unleashed. It wasn't a quiet joke. It wasn't a smirk. It was a full-throated tirade that left even her closest friends stunned. And what Meghan said that night, about specific royals, in specific detail, made the old lady in a hat insult look tame. Jessica swears that was the moment she realized Meghan's disdain wasn't just private entertainment. It was who she really was. And when you hear what Meghan said at that table, you'll understand why Jessica calls it the breaking point. Because what happened at that dinner wasn't just mockery. It was revelation. And it would change everything. Every story has a turning point. A moment when the whispers stop being whispers and become undeniable. For Jessica Mulroney, that moment came at a dinner party. A night that started with laughter, wine, and comfort among friends, and ended with words so sharp, so shocking, that Jessica says she can still hear them echoing in her head. It wasn't a palace banquet. It wasn't an official royal affair. It was private, a small circle of trusted people, a place where Meghan felt free to speak without cameras, without staff, without consequence. And it was in that intimate space that Jessica says Meghan showed her truest self. Let's set the scene. Picture the table, glasses clinking, plates cleared, conversation drifting from fashion to politics to the challenges of royal life. Meghan was at ease. Harry was there, quiet, letting his wife hold court as she so often did. Friends leaned in, listening to her anecdotes about adjusting to life inside the palace walls. Then, the mood shifted. Someone, Jessica doesn't say who, brought up the Queen. Maybe it was about her age, maybe about her schedule. And that's when Meghan delivered the line that Jessica says chilled the room. She's just a little old lady in a hat. Why should I bow to her? Laughter flickered around the table. A few nervous chuckles. Some shifted uncomfortably in their chairs. But Meghan didn't stop there. She doubled down. Jessica recalls Meghan leaning back, smirking, and adding, "The whole bowing thing is ridiculous. Do you honestly think I'm going to spend the rest of my life curtsying to people just because they were born into it?" That's when the floodgates opened. According to Jessica, Meghan moved from one royal to the next, tearing each down with precision. William? He's so uptight, he probably irons his shoelaces. The table laughed, but Jessica says she caught Harry's jaw tighten. Kate. Meghan allegedly mocked her posture, imitating her prim walk, and joked that Kate's smile looks like it's stapled onto her face. Some friends chuckled, but Jessica says she felt the cruelty in the remark. Charles. Meghan supposedly mimicked his clipped voice and hand gestures, calling him the world's most boring audiobook. She even poked fun at his hands, waving hers exaggeratedly for effect. Princessin. Meghan dismissed her entirely, saying, "Does anyone even care what it does? She's basically invisible." Each comment landed like a dagger. Not because the table hadn't heard jokes before, but because these weren't harmless observations. They were barbs, delivered with venom. Jessica says she sat frozen. She had defended Meghan countless times in public, insisting the Duchess was misunderstood, that she only wanted to be accepted. But here she was, mocking the very people she claimed had excluded her. And then came the remark Jessica says was the breaking point. Meghan, glass of wine in hand, leaned forward and said, "If it weren't for me, they'd still be stuck in the 1950s. I'm the only interesting thing that's happened to that family in decades." Let that sink in. Not just mocking, not just sneering, but declaring herself the savior of the monarchy, while simultaneously ridiculing its members. Jessica says the room went silent. Even the nervous laughter stopped. Harry looked down, expression unreadable. The tension was thick. And Meghan? She didn't flinch. She smirked, as if daring anyone to challenge her. That was the moment, Jessica insists, when she realized Meghan's disdain wasn't a quirk. It wasn't venting. It was who she was. A person who smiled in public, mocked in private, and truly believed she was above them all. But here's the cruel irony. Hours later, Meghan was back on camera, smiling at the very people she'd trashed. Public Meghan and private Meghan. The divide had never been clearer. Now pause here. Imagine being at that table. What would you do? Laugh along, call her out, or sit in stunned silence, knowing that repeating her words could detonate a bomb in the monarchy? Jessica chose silence that night, but the words stayed with her, gnawing at her conscience. Because she knew, if Meghan could say those things so casually, what else might she be saying in other rooms, to other people, about the royals, about the monarchy, even about Harry himself? And this is where the story takes a darker turn. Jessica claims Meghan's remarks that night weren't just about disdain. They revealed strategy. Meghan allegedly talked about how outdated the royals were, how much she and Harry could shake things up, how the monarchy needed her more than she needed it. Think about the arrogance in that. A centuries-old institution, reduced to a punchline. The Queen, mocked as irrelevant. The heirs, reduced to caricatures. And Meghan at the center, painting herself as the star of the show. This is why Jessica says that dinner party was the point of no return. Because once you hear someone mock with that level of confidence, that level of entitlement, you can never unhear it. And for Jessica, it was devastating. The Meghan she thought she knew, kind, compassionate, authentic, vanished that night. In her place stood a woman Jessica barely recognized. But if you think the dinner party was shocking, wait until you hear what happened after. Because Jessica swears that Meghan's words that night didn't just expose her disdain. They planted the seeds of something much bigger. Something that would eventually explode into public view. The infamous rift. The crumbling of friendships. The war with the palace. Jessica believes it all started that night, at that table, with those words. And what Meghan allegedly said next, about Princess and specifically, would ignite one of the most bitter tensions of all. Because mocking the Queen was one thing. Mocking William and Kate was cruel. But mocking Princess and that crossed a line Jessica says she could never ignore. And once you hear Meghan's exact words about, and you'll understand why Jessica calls it the moment of no forgiveness. There are lines you don't cross, even in private, even among friends. And Jessica Mulroney swears that at the infamous dinner party, Meghan Markle crossed one of those lines when she turned her scorn on Princess Anne. Why is this moment so important? Because Princess Anne isn't just another royal. She's the workhorse of the monarchy. The one who never sought the spotlight, never chased glamour, never asked for public sympathy. For decades, she's been the backbone of royal duty, attending more engagements than anyone else, working without fuss, and maintaining a reputation for blunt honesty. The British public respects her. The royal family relies on her. Even critics of the monarchy grudgingly admire her commitment. And yet, according to Jessica remembers it vividly. The conversation had already veered into dangerous territory. Meghan had mocked the Queen, ridiculed William and Kate, even turned Charles into a punchline. The room was tense. Some friends laughed nervously. Others went quiet. And then someone mentioned Anne. Jessica says Meghan leaned back in her chair, swirling her glass of wine, and scoffed. Anne? Please. She's completely irrelevant. No one even notices she exists. The words landed like a thunderclap. Because to anyone who understands the monarchy, and is the opposite of irrelevant, she's indispensable, tireless, respected even by people who dislike the institution itself. Jessica recalls the silence around the table. Even the people who had chuckled at Meghan's other jokes didn't laugh this time. The disrespect was too sharp, too blatant. Meghan wasn't mocking quirks. She was dismissing a woman's entire life of service. And that's when Jessica says she felt something shift inside her. Up until that moment, she had brushed off Meghan's private remarks as snarky humor, maybe even a way of coping with the pressures of royal life. But mocking Anne, that wasn't coping. That was cruelty. Because let's be clear, Anne has given her life to duty. No scandals, no dramas, no attempts to grab headlines. Just quiet, relentless service. She's one of the few royals even Republicans admit has earned respect. And Meghan allegedly threw it away with one sneer. Why does this matter? Because it reveals a deeper truth about Meghan's private disdain. Jessica insists it wasn't just about poking fun. It was about hierarchy. Meghan wasn't mocking Anne for her personality. She was mocking her for being unimportant in Meghan's eyes. That arrogance, Jessica says, was the clearest sign yet of how Meghan viewed the monarchy. Not as a centuries-old institution built on duty, but as a hierarchy of stars. And in Meghan's view, if you weren't glamorous, if you weren't headline-worthy, you didn't matter. It's the Hollywood mindset crashing into the Windsor way. In Hollywood, irrelevance is death. In the monarchy, irrelevance is often the point. You serve, you endure, you don't need the spotlight. That's Anne's entire ethos. And Meghan allegedly couldn't understand it. Or worse, refused to. Let's pause here. Ask yourself, what does it say about someone if they dismiss the most hard-working royal as irrelevant? Is that a reflection on Anne or on Meghan herself? Jessica believes it was the latter. She says Meghan sneered at and revealed the truth. Meghan only valued what glittered. Titles, attention, status. Anything else, hard work, duty, self-sacrifice, was invisible to her. Now, think about the timing. The Queen was aging. Charles was preparing to inherit the throne. William and Kate were stepping into bigger roles. And Anne, she was holding the institution together. Day after day, year after year, and Meghan allegedly wrote her off as irrelevant. Jessica says that was the moment she knew Meghan's disdain wasn't just private venting. It was contempt, a worldview that clashed violently with the very foundation of the monarchy. But here's the twist. Jessica claims Meghan didn't just dismiss Anne. She went further. She allegedly joked that Anne looked like a stable hand who wandered into the palace by accident. The remark, Jessica says, drew a few nervous laughs, but mostly horrified silence. Think about the insult. Reducing a princess, the Queen's only daughter, to a stable hand. It wasn't just mocking. It was degrading. A deliberate swipe at Anne's no-frills style, her country lifestyle, her love of horses and farming. And that's where the cruelty becomes clear. Anne's bluntness, her practicality, her refusal to play the glamour game. Those are the very traits that made her respected. But in Meghan's eyes, they were punchlines. Jessica swears she watched Harry's reaction closely. He didn't laugh. He didn't defend, and either. He just stared into his glass, silent, as if caught between loyalty to his wife and loyalty to his family. That silence spoke volumes. Because if Meghan felt comfortable mocking and in front of Harry, what did that say about the dynamic in their marriage? Did Harry agree? Did he secretly feel the same? Or had he simply surrendered to Meghan's dominance in private spaces? Jessica doesn't claim to know, but she says the look on Harry's face haunts her to this day. Now, you might wonder, why does this specific remark matter so much? After all, Meghan mocked plenty of royals, according to Jessica. But Jessica says Anne was the tipping point because Anne represented everything Meghan wasn't and never wanted to be. Anne's entire life has been about duty without glory. Meghan's entire life, Jessica claims, was about glory without duty. And that clash is the essence of this story. Meghan saw irrelevance where others saw service. Meghan saw boredom where others saw sacrifice. Meghan saw herself as the main character and everyone else as background extras. That's why mocking Anne was so revealing. It wasn't just cruel. It was telling. And Jessica says that's the moment she stopped laughing. That's the moment she realized she could no longer defend Meghan's words, even in her own mind. Because once you mock Princess and once you dismiss decades of duty as nothing, you've crossed into territory that can't be excused as joking. Jessica insists that night was the beginning of the end. Her faith in Meghan cracked. Her silence started to feel unbearable. And her loyalty, the loyalty that had kept her protecting Meghan for years, began to wither. But the story doesn't end there. Because if mocking Anne was the breaking point for Jessica, it was just another line in the sand for Meghan. She didn't stop. She didn't soften. In fact, Jessica says Meghan became bolder after that dinner, more brazen in her mockery. And the next target Meghan turned her words on wasn't Anne, or William, or Kate. It was the Queen. Again. But this time, Meghan's words weren't delivered with a smirk. They were delivered with open disdain. And what she said about bowing, about tradition, about the very idea of monarchy itself, shook Jessica to her core. Because that's when Jessica realized Meghan wasn't just mocking the royals. She was mocking the crown. Respect. That's the foundation of the monarchy. You might not like the pomp. You might not agree with the politics. You might even question the relevance of the institution in the 21st century. But for Queen Elizabeth II, respect was never optional. For 70 years, she embodied stability, duty, continuity. And yet, according to Jessica Mulroney, Meghan Markle shredded that respect in private, with words so dismissive they cut like glass. We've already heard the infamous line, She's just a little old lady in a hat. Why should I bow to her? It was shocking enough when Jessica first revealed it. But Jessica swears that wasn't a one-off remark. It wasn't an isolated slip. It was part of a pattern. And the more Meghan spoke about the Queen, the more Jessica says she realized Meghan's disdain wasn't a joke. It was genuine. Picture this. Meghan, radiant in public, curtsying gracefully before Elizabeth. The cameras flash. Headlines gush. Modern Duchess shows deference to ancient tradition. The world sees harmony, respect, a new chapter for the monarchy. But behind closed doors, Jessica says Meghan would laugh. She would roll her eyes. She would dismiss the curtsy as archaic nonsense and mock the idea of bowing to someone just because they were born first. Isn't that the contradiction that makes your jaw drop? The same woman who performed curtsies for the cameras allegedly ridiculing the very act in private. It wasn't nerves. It wasn't insecurity. Jessica insists it was contempt. And it wasn't just about the curtsy. Meghan allegedly tore into the Queen's image itself. Jessica recalls Meghan saying, "She walks around with handbags and hats like she's some kind of character in a play. It's all theater." That word, theater, is damning. Because if Meghan truly believed the monarchy was nothing more than theater, then every smile, every bow, every tribute she gave in public was an act. A performance designed not to honor, but to manipulate. Jessica says she felt sick hearing it. Because for her, the Queen wasn't theater. The Queen was history. She was sacrifice. She was a grandmotherly figure who had given her entire life to service. And Meghan allegedly reduced her to a costume character. But Meghan didn't stop there. Jessica claims she once overheard Meghan comparing the Queen to a prop, an accessory to the royal brand, rather than its beating heart. Think about the cruelty in that. To strip a human being. A woman who lived through wars, tragedies, and upheavals, down to a mere prop. Let me ask you this. If someone shows such disdain for the Queen, the most respected royal of all, how much respect do you think they showed for anyone else? Jessica insists that Meghan's words about Elizabeth were the clearest window into her true feelings about the monarchy. Not just skepticism, not just frustration, open disdain. And here's where the irony bites hardest. Meghan often claimed the monarchy didn't respect her, that she was marginalized, excluded, treated coldly. But Jessica says the reality was reversed. Meghan never respected them to begin with. From the Queen downward, she allegedly saw them all as relics. Outdated, amusing at best, irrelevant at worst. That realization gnawed at Jessica, because she had spent years defending Meghan, insisting to anyone who would listen that the Duchess was sincere, compassionate, misunderstood. But after hearing Meghan mock the Queen again and again, Jessica says she could no longer lie to herself. And the most chilling part? Meghan didn't just mock the Queen in passing. Jessica swears she sometimes used the mockery as fuel. She would say things like, "If they think I'm going to kneel forever, they don't know who they're dealing with." It wasn't just ridicule. It was defiance. Meghan allegedly saw herself not as a humble participant in tradition, but as a challenger to it. The crown wasn't something to honor. It was something to undermine. Do you see how dangerous that mindset is? The monarchy thrives on continuity, on unity, on the idea that no one, not even a glamorous duchess, is bigger than the crown. But Meghan, Jessica claims, wanted to flip that script. She wanted to prove she was bigger. Jessica remembers one conversation where Meghan allegedly said, "When people look back on this family, they won't remember the Queen's hats or Charles's speeches. They'll remember me." Stop and think about that. The Queen gave 70 years of service. Charles spent a lifetime preparing to rule. William devoted his adulthood to duty. And Meghan, after a handful of years in the family, allegedly believed she would overshadow them all. Arrogance, ambition, or both? Jessica insists it was both. And it terrified her. Because she realized Meghan's disdain for the Queen wasn't just personal. It was symbolic. If you can laugh at Elizabeth, you can laugh at the entire institution. And if you can laugh at the institution, you can tear it down. That's what Jessica says Meghan was doing, brick by brick, smirk by smirk. Now let's pause. Imagine you're Harry. You grew up with reverence for your grandmother. You watched her carry the monarchy through storms. And then the woman you love, the woman you married, mocks her as a little old lady in a hat. What does that do to your loyalty? To your heart? Jessica says Harry's reactions were complicated. Sometimes he laughed along, as if mocking his family was his way of rebelling too. Other times he stayed silent, visibly uncomfortable. But he never stopped Meghan, never challenged her, never defended the Queen. That silence is its own betrayal. Because silence, in moments like those, isn't neutrality. It's consent. And Jessica swears that's what broke her the most. Not just Meghan's words, but Harry's silence. But the Queen insult didn't exist in isolation. Jessica insists Meghan tied it into a larger narrative. She allegedly said things like, "They all act like the Queen is untouchable. But she's just another person. And if I don't play the game, what can they really do to me?" That mindset, that defiance, wasn't just casual talk. It was strategy. Meghan allegedly believed the monarchy couldn't touch her, that she could push, mock, ridicule, and still win. And here's where the story turns darker still. Jessica hints that Meghan didn't just keep her words private. She may have left traces, messages, notes, snippets of conversations that, if ever revealed, could blow the palace narrative wide open. Proof, Jessica suggests, may exist. Proof of the mockery. Proof of the disdain. Proof that Meghan's smiles for the Queen were masks hiding sneers. And that's what makes this story so dangerous. Because it's not just one woman's word against another's. It's the possibility that somewhere, in texts or recordings, Meghan's private truth is captured forever. Can you imagine the impact if those words were ever leaked? Headlines screaming, "Meghan mocked the Queen in private." The public outcry would be seismic. But Jessica doesn't claim to have released proof. Not yet. She only hints at it. And that's what keeps the tension alive. Because if she's telling the truth, the receipts may exist. And if they exist, the monarchy isn't just battling gossip. It's battling evidence. That's why Jessica's revelations about the Queen matter more than anything else. They don't just paint Meghan as hypocritical. They paint her as dangerous, someone who used the monarchy's most sacred figure as a private punchline. And here's the final twist of this chapter. Jessica insists the Queen was only the beginning. Meghan's disdain spread wider. Beyond Elizabeth, beyond Charles, beyond William and Kate. Because Jessica says Meghan's sharpest, most cutting words weren't even reserved for the senior royals. They were reserved for the system itself. The crown, the duty, the very idea of monarchy. And once you hear what Meghan allegedly said about that, you'll realize the Queen remark was just the opening act. Because the real performance, Jessica swears, was Meghan plotting how to tear the whole show down. So far, we've heard Jessica Mulroney's account of Meghan Markle mocking the royals. The Queen reduced to a little old lady in a hat. Prince William caricatured as a stiff robot. Kate Middleton's smile dismissed as fake. Princess and written off as irrelevant. Charles transformed into a punchline about hands and speeches. But here's the question that separates gossip from history. Where's the proof? We live in an age where words travel faster than truth. A rumor can go viral before facts catch up. A single offhand remark can destroy reputations. So when Jessica dropped her bombshells, skeptics immediately asked, is this memory or is this evidence? Jessica anticipated that question, and her answer is both chilling and tantalizing. She claims she didn't just hear Meghan's disdain. She says she kept fragments of proof. Now pause here. Proof can mean a lot of things. Text messages, emails, voicemails, even handwritten notes. And Jessica has hinted, but never fully confirmed, that she has at least some of those. Let's imagine what that would mean. Picture Meghan, in a moment of private frustration, texting Jessica about an upcoming engagement. Do I really have to bow again? She's just an old lady in a hat. Imagine a voice note, Meghan laughing as she imitates Kate's accent. Imagine an email where Meghan dismisses and as irrelevant. Do those receipts exist? Jessica has never published them, but she's teased their existence enough to send shockwaves through royal watchers. And that's the danger, isn't it? Words spoken in private are damaging enough. But words recorded or written down, they're unerasable. They linger. They prove intent. They transform gossip into weapon. So ask yourself, why would Jessica hint at proof if she didn't have any? What does she gain from the tease? Skeptics argue it's a bluff, a way to give her words more weight without risking exposure. Others believe she has them, but is holding back, waiting for the right moment. Maybe for protection, maybe for leverage. Jessica herself has said, I know what I heard, and I know what I still have. That line alone is enough to make you wonder. Now let's be clear. Even without proof, Jessica's words carry weight. She wasn't just a casual acquaintance. She was Meghan's confidante, her stylist, her fixer. She was there in private rooms. She heard conversations no one else did. That proximity gives her credibility. But credibility isn't the same as evidence. And in today's world, the demand for receipts is louder than ever. So let's ask the uncomfortable question. What if Jessica is telling the truth, but never shows the proof? Does that make it less true? Or does it simply make it harder to believe? And what if she does have proof, but refuses to release it? Would that be seen as cowardice or as restraint? Think about the stakes. If Jessica were to leak a text of Meghan mocking the Queen, it wouldn't just embarrass Meghan. It would ignite a global scandal. The monarchy, still mourning Elizabeth, would be forced to respond. Harry's marriage could be shaken to its core. Meghan's credibility, already fragile, could shatter completely. Jessica may not want that blood on her hands. At least, not yet. But here's where the story gets even more twisted. Some insiders whisper that Jessica has been quietly approached, not just by journalists, but by lawyers. If Meghan repeated her false narratives in official filings, as some allege, then Jessica's testimony, and any proof she holds, could become evidence in a courtroom. Imagine that. Meghan's private mockery of the Queen not just as gossip, but as sworn testimony in a legal case. That possibility alone keeps Meghan's camp on edge. Because if Jessica's words are ever dragged into the light of a courtroom, the demand for receipts won't be optional. It will be required. And Jessica, under oath, would have to produce whatever she has. So where does that leave us now? In limbo, suspended between gossip and proof, between whispers and documents, between Jessica's memory and Meghan's reputation. And this limbo is powerful, because the not knowing fuels curiosity. It keeps the public hooked. It forces the question, what if she's telling the truth? What if the receipts exist? This uncertainty is Meghan's worst nightmare. Because rumors can be spun away, lies can be denied. But proof? Proof lingers forever. And Jessica isn't the only one who might have it. Others were present at those dinners. Others heard Meghan's remarks. Others received texts, jokes, confidences. Jessica may be the first to speak, but she may not be the last. Imagine if a former staffer steps forward with a saved message. Imagine if a journalist gets hold of leaked audio. Imagine if a court subpoena drags Meghan's private communications into the open. What would be left of the carefully crafted image then? Jessica herself plays coy. In interviews, she leans on phrases like, "I'll say this much," or "I'll never forget what I saw." She never fully confirms. She never fully denies. And that ambiguity keeps the story alive. But Jessica has also warned. Meghan underestimated her. Meghan assumed she would stay silent forever. And that assumption, Jessica insists, was Meghan's greatest mistake. Now here's the final twist of this chapter. Jessica says the Queen remark, shocking as it was, is nothing compared to what Meghan allegedly asked her to do later. That's right. Jessica claims Meghan once pushed her to take an impossible step, a favor so outrageous it risked everything Jessica had. And when Jessica refused, it didn't just strain their friendship. It shattered it. That impossible favor, Jessica swears, was the beginning of the end. And once you hear what Meghan allegedly demanded, you'll understand why Jessica finally decided she could never go back. Every friendship has moments of testing. Small requests, big sacrifices, times when loyalty is measured not by words, but by actions. For Jessica Mulroney, that test came when Meghan Markle allegedly asked her for something so outrageous, so dangerous, that it pushed their friendship to the breaking point. Jessica calls it the impossible favor. And once you hear what it was, you'll understand why their bond could never recover. Let's rewind. By this point, Meghan and Jessica had already weathered years together. They'd shared weddings, photo shoots, private dinners, late-night phone calls. Jessica had been Meghan's stylist, her fixer, her cheerleader. She had smoothed over public appearances, whispered encouragement before interviews, even defended Meghan in private circles when others doubted her sincerity. But loyalty has limits. And Jessica says Meghan crossed hers when she asked her to go further than a friend ever should. So what was the impossible favor? Jessica has never revealed it in exact, legal detail, but she's given enough hints to paint the picture. According to her, Meghan wanted her to cover for her, to shield her, to help spin or even fabricate narratives that would protect Meghan's image. even if it meant bending truth to the breaking point. Think about the weight of that. It wasn't just about picking out the right dress or defending her in gossip columns. It was about putting her own name, her own credibility, her own career on the line, all to make Meghan look good. Jessica swears the request came during one of Meghan's most precarious moments. Rumors were swirling. Stories were breaking.